This is very difficult. Where is this?
Good afternoon and welcome from me, Daniel Brittain, to BBC Parliament's live coverage of the prorogation of the 54th Parliament of the United Kingdom. We're looking at the clock in the House of Lords, which says 9.5 minutes past 5, and we expect to be getting full pictures from the House of Lords very soon. But we've got guests here. Let me just tell you, the election's, of course, been announced. MPs and peers have spent the last 2 days rushing through legislation in the so-called wash-up. Some 16 bills have been considered, and we're approaching the time to prorogue Parliament. We're expecting it about 5:15, and that's the official ceremony, prorogation, where both houses of Parliament gather in the House of Lords to hear a message read on behalf of the Queen, which will bring not just this session, but the whole 2005 to 2010 Parliament to a close. Well, with me in the studio here at Westminster, I'm very glad to say I'm joined by the former Speaker and now crossbench peer, Baroness Boothroyd, and an old friend of the BBC Parliament and these end-of-term soirees here at prorogation, David Beamish, Clerk Assistant in the House of Lords. Lady Boothroyd.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm very well. And you?
I'm in first-class condition, thank you.
You're in first-class condition. This is excellent. Are you pleased or sad to see the end of this Parliament?
I think many of us are quite happy to see the end of it, quite honestly. Sadness, too, that it has not been one of the best parliaments, but good that it's at an end and we're going to make a fresh start. Lots of old friends are going and new faces will come, names that we don't know. Many will be missed. So in that sense, it's sad, but it's good that we've got to the end of it. It's been hanging fire for some time. So now we make a clean break, have an election and get on with things.
Both houses have got incidents that they would, at the very least, like to forget.
Absolutely.
How possible is that, and is it going to, do you think, influence people in the coming general election?
I think it's bound to influence people in the coming election. I mean, it's really been on the minds of the electorate of men and women in the street, and quite rightly so, for so long now. It's bound to have an effect on them. What it will, we shall see the results of it. What the effect it has had, I think, in the election when it's over. But it's on everybody's mind. It's bound to be.
David, this is wonderful television. We're seeing a beautifully Pugin-designed clock in the House of Lords, which you probably now tell us where you sit in relation to that clock and what we are going to see this afternoon.
Where I normally sit during a sitting at the House is in the middle of 3 chairs at the table of the House, so I have my back to the clock and facing the throne and the Lord Speaker on the woolsack. This afternoon, in a minute or two, the Lord Speaker will be on the woolsack, but only briefly, because the sitting will then be adjourned and a bench of 5 royal commissioners, that's to say members of the House of Lords who are Privy Councillors, will come in wearing their robes and sit on a bench in front of the throne, and they have been appointed by the Queen to appear on her behalf to close this session of Parliament. And the ceremony will include the reading by my colleague Rhodri Walters, the reading clerk, of the document empowering them to close the session.
Can I just say you're looking extremely fresh-faced and everything. You're looking fresh-faced. What time did you finish sitting in the House of Lords last night?
Well, it's very kind of you to say so, because I'm not sure how fresh I'm feeling. 10 to 3 was when we rose as a result of the so-called wash-up, trying to get all the legislation through.
That's quite a lot of washing up, isn't it?
It was. Lots of different bills, and back again at 11 today.
Back again at 11, so you had how long? Not much sleep then. Were you till 3 a.m. last night?
No, I've done my stint, I think, over the years, Daniel, in staying late at night and being in the chair and being in the Speaker's chair until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. So I felt able to go. I was very concerned and very interested in what was taking place yesterday, and I was in the chamber a good deal of the time. I checked at 9:30 to see what was happening, and we got the results on one bill that I really wanted, so I felt that I could go home.
What was that one? Now, we are seeing we're seeing a wide shot of the House of Lords. We're seeing the shot of the House of Lords, peers assembling for the start of the Prorogation Ceremony. What was the bill you were interested in?
I was interested in the bill, the constitutional bill.
You've had strong views on that. You're a woman of strong views.
And so I should have as a former Speaker of the Commons. And
what you said was, I cannot remember a more flagrant example of the mismanagement of an important constitutional bill during my time in public life.
Very clever and right of you to quote me in that. It was very strong stuff, my speech of the second reading, and I interrupted the Minister when he was introducing it to ask him how many times a constitutional bill had gone in the wash-up.
The House rises for the entrance of the Lord Speaker, Lady Harman, taking her seat on the woolsack. She won't be there that long because shortly she'll go off and become one of the Royal Commissioners. And what we're looking for is the Leader of the House of Lords, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Lady Royall, who will be announcing that the Queen won't be here in person.
My Lords, it not being convenient for Her Majesty personally to be here present this day, she has been pleased to cause a commission under the Great Seal to be prepared for proroguing this present Parliament.
With that news, the Leader of the House, the Chancellor of the Duchy and the Lord Speaker depart, and they'll put on their Royal Commissioners' robes. Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster is one of the oldest offices in the government service, and just a couple of weeks ago 20 former Chancellors of the Duchy had a dinner. Lady Royall hosted it. The Queen was guest of honour. Previous Chancellor, Lord Hunt of Wirral, said it was a unique and memorable event. And Lord Parkinson, I was chatting to him this afternoon in the House of Lords. He was a previous Chancellor of the Duchy. He said the Queen and Lady Royall were getting on like a house on fire.
Lady Royall looks very fresh, doesn't she? I mean, let's face it, she was up half the night too, you know. She had a very rough day yesterday, did that lady, and accomplished it extremely well. She was up until well after 3 o'clock this morning. Now she's back at before 11 o'clock this morning. So, you know, pay a bit of compliment to her as well as to our learned clerk here.
Everyone is looking both learned and fresh, so we're agreed on that. How many bills have you discussed in the last 2 days?
Gosh, I've lost count.
We think it's about 16.
One thing I should have said earlier was that as part of the prorogation ceremony, any bills that are waiting for royal assent get it. And so we'll have a long list read out of, it's at least 16. There's some private bills as well, local bills, and each of those will have
17.
Very possibly.
17 bills. Now, normally at prorogation, we just hear the phrase, La Reine la Volte. But we have a treat in store today, don't we, David?
For most of the bills, that is indeed the words which my colleague Michael Pannell will pronounce on behalf of the Queen. The first 2 bills, though, are so-called supply bills. They're bills all about money, and the Queen uses a special form of words to thank the Commons for granting her money, namely, La Reine remercie ses bons sujets, accepte leur bénévolence et ainsi le vote, which is old-fashioned Norman French for the Queen thanks her good subjects, accepts their benevolence and wishes it so.
And it's not often we have Norman French here in the studio, and it's nice to have one of the world's few exponents of it.
Fortunately, we only use it on these occasions in the House of Lords. And incidentally, the other curious feature of these 2 bills is that because they are ones that are particularly related to Commons privilege, they will be brought up by the Commons, and you'll see at the beginning of the ceremony the Speaker of the House of Commons will hand the sort of master copies of the bills, what we call House bills, to the Clerk of the Parliament. That's what that's about. Other bills are already in the House of Lords sitting on the table.
Now, it's quite a long phrase, especially in Norman French. Is the Clerk of the Parliament's up to it? He's got to remember it?
He's been working hard on practising it. He's not the only one. Black Rod also has quite a complicated formula to use when he goes to summon the Commons, and I think he's been practising too.
He didn't get it quite right last time, so I know from him he's determined to get it right this time. What about the wash-up, Lady Boothroyd? It was a lot of bills, 16 bills in 2 days.
There were a lot.
Satisfactory?
It is not at all satisfactory, no. Oh, look here.
And here are the Royal Commissioners. Let's come back to that. Yes. Led by Chancellor of Duchy, Lady Royall, and followed by the other Lords Commissioners. On the left there, Lord Shutt of Greekland, making his first appearance as a Royal Commissioner. Lord McNally has handed over to him this time. He's just become a Privy Councillor. You have to be a Privy Councillor to be on the Royal Commission. I've been told, David, he's been practising his hat doffing with the clerk. and we'll see how well he does. Lord McNally's advice was look at Lord Strathclyde, he always gets it right. But it's only the men who doff their hats, and we've got 2 men and 3 women. And here's the Chancellor of the Duchy to read essentially the commission from the Queen for the Royal Commission to act on her behalf. But first she'll ask for the Commons to be summoned so they can hear the commission read.
Interesting to me that the mace is on the woolsack.
Yes, I suppose it's not the Queen, it is merely the representatives of the Queen.
Yes. Interesting.
So our full commissioners are Lady Royall, the Lord Speaker, Lady Harman, the Leader of the Opposition, Lord Strathclyde, I guess clearly hoping that the Tories, if they win the election, that he might become Leader of the House of Lords, the Liberal Democrat Chief Whip, Lord Shutt of Greekland, and the convener of the crossbenchers, Lady de Souza. You were saying, Lady Boothroyd, you didn't think 2 days dealing with 16 bills was a great idea.
No, I think it was a dreadful way of the use of Parliament. I think it was a negation of democracy. I feel very strongly about it. Wash-up, I understand. Unless you have a fixed term of Parliament, you're bound to get a wash-up. But wash-up should only be for bills that are not very consequential, just left over, the hangover, not major constitutional bills like we had to deal with the other day.
Black Rod. Freddie Viggers approaches the Royal Commissioners to receive their commands.
Let the Commons know that the Lords Commissioners desire their immediate attendance in this House to hear the commission read.
I'm not sure we heard that terribly clearly, or we did hear it terribly clearly. That's good. Give me a minute. Freddie Viggers has got the command from Lady Royall, and he's setting off. This is his second prorogation. He was appointed on 30th April 2009.
There he is.
An old army man. He retired as Adjutant General of the Forces. That was his final position. And in the Commons, we see them all waiting for Black Rod to come along. Dennis Skinner taking his seat. He's probably preparing a line right now. What were you thinking of this time, Lady Boothroyd, sitting there in your chair, waiting for Black Rod to approach you?
I was just relaxing, getting ready. It was wonderful because I had a first clerk I had, Sir Clifford Bolton, who took me into the Lords. He said, now, relax, this is going to take some time. Don't worry about it, just relax. This was my first clerk, who was very instructive and very helpful. So I was just relaxing.
Relaxing?
Yes.
That's very nice. The principal doorkeeper, Geoffrey Deere of the House of Commons, is waiting. And, of course, they're waiting to hear the door slammed in Black Rod's face as he approaches the Commons.
Close the door! Black Rod! Open the door!
Bit of kerfuffle, but they've decided to open the door for Black Rod, and he will approach the Speaker with the words to summon the Lords, much more words than he will use at state opening. Quite a complicated formula.
Mr. Speaker, the Lords who are authorised by virtue of Her Majesty's Commission to declare her royal assent to acts passed in both Houses and the prorogation of Parliament desire the attendance of this Honourable House in the House of Peers.
Well, there were one or two slips, but it was pretty good. He was pretty good on the words.
Yes.
And that is the Deputy Sergeant-at-Arms in the House of Commons. And the Speaker leaves John Bercow, only Speaker since June of last year, leaves with Black Rod, and behind them, the Clerk of the House of Commons, Malcolm Jack. He had a bit of a sticky time recently. He gave evidence to the Committee of Privileges following the incident where the police came into Damien Green's office, and the Speaker and the Sergeant, the then Speaker, Michael Martin, and the Clerk and the Sergeant-at-Arms, they did get a bit criticised by the Privileges Committee, chaired by Sir Ming Campbell. They're off on their way to the Commons, to the Lords, and they're going to be greeted by hat doffing, David. Now, we're looking for good hat work, a clean doff, but what will it look like? What are we looking for in...
Well, the ladies obviously have it easy. They leave their hats on, but the men need synchronising, I suppose, is the trickiest bit, to lift their hats and bring them forward cleanly and put them back together. So it perhaps depends on having the ability to look out of the corner of your eye so you can keep in time with the person on your right or left. But,
Now, you've led this procession
Yes,
as Speaker.
yes.
So what are you thinking when you go along the corridor?
I think I hope it's going to go right. I'm going to behave myself. I'm not going to laugh in all the wrong places, but I'm going to have a good time and enjoy it all. And I did. It's a very important ceremony, and I'm being flippant about it. I took it very seriously, really. It's hugely important, is these sort of traditions that we have, I think, in Parliament. Long may they reign, as far as I'm concerned.
Harriet Harman, the Leader of the House of Commons, Sir George Young, the Tory spokesman.
There they go.
Better going back on than coming off, I think.
thought so. Very smart going back. A bit sort of higgledy-piggledy getting off, but going back very good.
One more to go.
Yeah.
there's the clerk receiving the bills from the Speaker.
Now, which bills are those, David?
Those
Not all the
are-
bills.
No, just the appropriation bill and the finance bill.
And this unusually because the budget has been passed in this spillover section. Normally we'd get a budget in July. We'll now hear from Lady Royall.
Her Majesty, not thinking fit personally to be present here at this time, has been pleased to cause a commission to be issued under the Great Seal and thereby given her royal assent to divers acts, the titles whereof are particularly mentioned, and by the said commission has commanded us to declare and notify her royal assent to the said several acts, in the presence of you, the Lords and Commons assembled for that purpose, and has also assigned to us and other Lords directed full power and authority in Her Majesty's name to prorogue this present Parliament, which commission you will now hear read.
Elizabeth II, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and of our other realms and territories, Queen, Head of the Commonwealth, Defender of the Faith, to our right trusty and right well beloved, the Lord Spiritual and Temporal, and to our trusty and well beloved, the knights, citizens and burgesses of the House of Commons, in this present Parliament assembled, greeting. Forasmuch as in our said Parliament divers acts have been agreed upon by you, our loving subjects, the Lord Spiritual and Temporal and the Commons, the short titles of which are set forth in the schedule hereto. But the said acts are not of force and effect in the law without our royal assent. And forasmuch as we cannot at this time be present in the higher house of our said Parliament, being the accustomed place for giving our royal assent to such acts as have been agreed upon by you, our said subjects, the Lords and Commons, we have therefore caused these our letters patent to be made, and have signed them, and by them do give our royal assent to the said acts, willing that the said act shall be of the same strength, force, and effect as if we had been personally present in the said higher house, and had publicly, and in the presence of you all, assented to the same. Commanding also our well-beloved and faithful counsellor, John Whitaker Straw, Chancellor of Great Britain, to seal these our letters with the great seal of our realm. And also commanding the most reverend Father in God, our faithful counsellor, Rowan Douglas, Archbishop of Canterbury, Primate of all England and Metropolitan, our well-beloved and faithful counsellors, John Whitaker Straw, Chancellor of Great Britain, Helene Valerie, Baroness Harman, Lord Speaker, Thomas Galloway Dunlop de Roy de Bleaky, Lord Strathclyde, David Trevor, Lord Shutt of Greetland, Janet Ann, Baroness Royall of Blaisdon, Frances Gertrude Clare, Baroness de Souza, or any three or more of them, to declare this our royal assent in the said higher house, in the presence of you, the said Lords and Commons, and the Clerk of our Parliaments, to endorse the said acts in our name as is requisite, and to record these our letters patent and the said acts in manner accustomed. And we do declare that after this our royal assent given and declared as is aforesaid, then and immediately the said acts shall be taken and accepted as good and perfect acts of Parliament, and be put in due execution accordingly. And whereas we did lately for divers difficult and pressing affairs, concerning us the state and defence of our United Kingdom and Church, ordain this our present Parliament to begin and be holden at our city of Westminster, the 11th day of May, in the 54th year of our reign, on which day our said Parliament was begun and holden, and is there now holden. Know ye that for certain pressing causes and considerations us especially moving, we have thought fit to prorogue our said Parliament. We therefore, confiding very much in the fidelity, prudence, and circumspection of you, our commissioners aforesaid, have, by the advice and consent of our council, assigned you our commissioners, giving to you or any three or more of you, by virtue of these presents, full power and authority in our name to prorogue and continue our present Parliament at our city of Westminster aforesaid, from Thursday the 8th day of April until and unto Tuesday the 20th day of April, there then to be holden. And we command you that you diligently attend the premises and effectually fulfill them in manner aforesaid. We also strictly command all and singular our archbishops, bishops, lords, baronets, knights, citizens and burgesses, and all others whom it concerns, to meet at our said Parliament by virtue of these presents, that they observe, obey, and assist you in executing the premises as they ought to do. In witness whereof we have caused these our letters to be made patent. Witness ourself at Westminster, the 8th day of April, in the 59th year of our reign, by the Queen herself, signed with her own hand.
Lady Royal will now prepare for the moment where royal assent is given to the acts, and there'll be about 16, 17 of them.
To Her Majesty's commands, and by virtue of the commission which has now been read, we do declare and notify to you, the Lords Spiritual and Temporal, and the Commons in Parliament assembled, that Her Majesty has given her royal assent to the several acts in the commission mentioned, and the clerks are required to pass the same in the usual form and words.
20 Acts of Parliament. The Deputy Clerk of the Crown will read the titles. The Clerk of the Parliaments will give the Queen's assent. Watch out for the first two.
Appropriation number 2 Act.
La Reine remercie ces bons sujets, accepte la bénévolence et ainsi le vote.
Finance Act.
La Reine remercie ces bons sujets, accepte la bénévolence et ainsi le vote.
Anti-Slavery Day Act.
La Reine le vote.
Equality Act.
La Reine le vote.
Northern Ireland Assembly Members Act.
La Reine le vote.
Crime and Security Act.
La Reine le vote.
Personal Care at Home Act.
La Reine le vote.
Mortgage Repossessions, Protection of Tenants, etc. Act.
La Reine le vote.
Sunbeds Regulation Act.
La Reine le vote.
Sustainable Communities Act 2007 Amendment Act.
La Reine le vote.
Debt Relief Developing Countries Act.
La Reine le vote.
Bribery Act.
La Reine le vote.
Digital Economy Act.
La Reine le vote.
Constitutional Reform and Governance Act.
La Reine le vote.
Children, Schools and Families Act.
La Reine le vote.
Energy Act.
La Reine le vote.
Financial Services Act.
La Reine le vote.
Flood and Water Management Act.
La Reine le vote.
Bournemouth Borough Council Act.
La Reine le vote.
Manchester City Council Act.
La Reine le vote.
Those last two acts are what are called private acts, promoted by city councils. There were 5 private members' bills that got through, unusual in such a short session.
My Lords and Members of the House of Commons, we are commanded to deliver you Her Majesty's speech in Her Majesty's own words. My Lords and Members of the House of Commons, my government's overriding priority has been to restore growth to deliver a fair and prosperous economy for families and businesses as the British economy recovers from the global economic downturn. Through employment and training programmes, restructuring the financial sector, strengthening the national infrastructure and providing responsible investment, my government has taken action to support growth and employment. My government has also strengthened key public services, ensuring that increasingly individual entitlements guarantee good services and has worked to build trust in democratic institutions. My government has sought effective global and European collaboration, including through the European Union, to combat climate change, including at the Copenhagen summit in December last year, and to sustain economic recovery through the G20. The Duke of Edinburgh and I were pleased to visit Bermuda and Trinidad and Tobago for our state visit and to attend the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in the Commonwealth's 60th anniversary year. We were glad to welcome the President of South Africa on his successful visit to the country earlier this year. The Duke of Edinburgh and I were saddened to learn of the devastation brought on Haiti and Chile by recent earthquakes and hope that relief and reconstruction efforts, which my government and the British people have supported, can build on the spirit and resilience displayed by their people. My government has continued to reform and strengthen regulation of the financial services industry to ensure a stable financial sector that supports the wider economy with greater protection for savers and taxpayers. As the economic recovery is established, my government has taken steps to reduce the budget deficit and ensure that national debt is on a sustainable path. Legislation has been enacted to halve the deficit. An act has been passed to enable the wider provision of free personal care to those with the highest needs. An act has been passed to protect communities by ensuring that parents take responsibility for their children's antisocial behaviour and by tackling youth gang crime. An act has been passed to ensure that communications infrastructure is fit for the digital age, supports future economic growth, delivers competitive communications and enhances public service broadcasting. Legislation has been acted to support carbon capture and storage and to help more of the most vulnerable households with their energy bills. My government has set out proposals for high-speed rail services between London and Scotland. Legislation has been enacted to protect communities from flooding and to improve the management of water supplies. My government has remained committed to ensuring everyone has a fair chance in life, and an act has been passed to promote equality, narrow the gap between rich and poor, and tackle discrimination. The Act also introduces transparency in the workplace to help address the differences in pay between men and women. An Act has been passed to enshrine in law the commitment by my government to abolish child poverty by 2020. Legislation has been enacted to provide agency workers with the right to be treated equally with permanent staff on pay, holidays and other basic conditions after 12 weeks on an assignment. Legislation has been enacted to take forward constitutional reform. An Act has been passed to strengthen the law against bribery. My government has continued to work closely with the devolved administrations in the interests of all of the people of the United Kingdom. My government has remained committed to the Northern Ireland political process and has continued to work with Northern Ireland's leaders to ensure the continued stability of the devolved institutions and to complete the process of devolution by transferring policing and justice functions in April this year. In Scotland, my government set out plans to further strengthen devolution in its response to the final report of the Commission on Scottish Devolution. My government has continued to devolve more powers to Wales and has remained committed to a referendum on further devolution. Members of the House of Commons, I thank you for the provision you have made for the work and dignity of the Crown and for the public service. My Lords and members of the House of Commons, my government has worked for security, stability and prosperity in Afghanistan and Pakistan and for peace in the Middle East. Legislation has been enacted to ban cluster munitions. My government has continued to work towards creating the conditions for a world without nuclear weapons, including addressing the challenges from Iran and North Korea. Draft legislation has been published to make binding my government's commitment to spend 0.7% of national income on international development from 2013. My Lords and members of the House of Commons, I pray that the blessing of Almighty God may rest upon your councils.
And now,
my Lords and members of the House of Commons,
prorogation.
by virtue of Her Majesty's Commission, which has now been read, we do, in Her Majesty's name, and in obedience to Her Majesty's commands, prorogue this Parliament to the 20th day of April, and to be then here holden, and this Parliament is accordingly prorogued to Tuesday, the 20th day of April.
Now, David, that seemed a little surprising. It says Parliament prorogued till the 20th of April, but we all know that they're going to be dissolved, or we know they're going to be dissolved on Monday. So why the 20th of April?
Indeed, well, prorogation is the process of suspending rather than killing off a Parliament, and dissolution doesn't involve a parliamentary ceremony, but simply the Queen and the Privy Council signing a piece of paper, so to speak, and that will happen next Monday. But obviously to have ended the session without any ceremony would have been disappointing, at least for the retiring MPs. So we had the ceremony.
And we've got a lot of MPs. A lot of MPs have come to prorogation, far more, almost more than in the House of Lords this time.
In this
Deputy
case,
Speaker Sylvia Heal there, just leaving through the back of the House of Lords. Yes, sorry,
but obviously it was to a fictitious date, sometime before which, next Monday, in fact, Parliament will be dissolved.
And that prorogation, that proclamation on Monday is expected to say the words, "We do publish this, our royal proclamation, and do hereby dissolve the said Parliament." But quite soon she says she'd like to meet MPs and people again. So the Queen says in the proclamation, expected on Monday, "And we being desirous to meet our people and to have their advice in Parliament, do hereby make known to all our loving subjects our royal will and pleasure to call a new Parliament." Now, we've all left the House of Lords. The MPs have left the House of Lords. The Royal Commissioners are still there. And we're still there. Betty, what did you make of that? Do you remember all that?
Yes, I do. But don't you think that the clerk was right to sort of caution me and prepare me to stand there for such a long ceremony the first time? It was very good of him. But that's what clerks are for, isn't it? To look after speakers. But looking at the faces there, the members of Parliament who came in support of the Speaker, saw so many faces of people who will not be coming back. And I think that they came in specially. I don't think I've ever seen such so many people there at prorogation before, but there were a lot this afternoon now.
It's a very good turnout. In fact, if we see in the House of Commons, we can see the first of the MPs. Just briefly look in the House of Commons, we can see the MPs going back, but in the House of Lords, the yeoman usher of the Black Rod is collecting, as it were, the Lord Speaker. In the Commons, they're going back, but back in the House of Lords, The Lord Speaker leaves the chamber in the House of Lords. The Lord Speaker heading under that clock, David. The mace of the House of Lords, the Lord Speaker, and at the same time, the Royal Commissioners, the other Royal Commissioners, apart from the Lord Speaker, are disappearing at the other end of the House of Lords. The clock in the House of Lords showing 6:15, actually 16 minutes to 6, as they come to the end in the Lords. But over in the Commons, everyone is assembling, and it's a very good turnout in the House of Commons for prorogation. You may have seen the Reverend Ian Paisley there, who made his last speech last week. One of many faces wanting to say goodbye to the Speaker, goodbye to the House of Commons, goodbye to the Houses of Parliament for the last time as a member of this place. And it will be a sad moment for many, won't it?
Yes, of course it is. It is a very sad moment.
And here, actually, the Speaker, the Leader of the House and her opposite number.
Opposite, yes. What are they chatting about there, do you suppose?
They seem happy.
Who's going first or something like that? Is that right? Do you think? They seem happy. Oh, the Speaker's very happy.
Lord Speaker will tell us what they've been up to.
Yes.
Order. I have to acquaint the House that the House has been to the House of Peers, where a commission under the Great Seal was read, authorising the royal assent to the following acts. Appropriation Number 2 Act 2010, Finance Act 2010, Anti-Slavery Day Act 2010, Equality Act 2010, Northern Ireland Assembly Members Act 2010, Crime and Security Act 2010, Personal Care at Home Act 2010, Mortgage Repossessions, Protection of Tenants, etc. Act 2010, Sunbeds Regulations Act 2010, Sustainable Communities 2007 Amendment Act 2010, Debt Relief Developing Countries Act 2010, Bribery Act 2010, Digital Economy Act 2010, Constitutional Reform and Governance Act 2010, Children's Schools and Families Act 2010, Energy Act 2010, Financial Services Act 2010, Flood and Water Management Act 2010, Bournemouth Borough Council Act 2010, Manchester City Council Act 2010. I have further to acquaint the House that the Leader of the House of Lords, one of the Lords Commissioners, delivered Her Majesty's most gracious speech to both Houses of Parliament in pursuance of Her Majesty's command. For greater accuracy, I have obtained a copy and also directed that the terms of the speech be printed in the Journal of this House. Copies are being made available in the Vote Office. The Commission was also for proroguing this present Parliament, and the Leader of the House of Lords said, "My Lords and members of the House of Commons, by virtue of Her Majesty's Commission, which has now been read, we do, in Her Majesty's name and in obedience to Her Majesty's commands, prorogue this Parliament to the 20th day of April, to be then here holden, and this Parliament is accordingly prorogued to Tuesday, the 20th day of April." Order.
Take that 20th of April with a pinch of salt. It just has to last the Parliament beyond the next few days, but it will be dissolved, we expect, on Monday. And now, MPs say farewell to the Speaker. 16 bills dealt with in the wash-up, 20 given royal assent then. Both houses have been fantastically busy in the last 2 days. The Chief Whip, Labour Government Chief Whip, Nick Brown, saying farewell to the Speaker. Jowell there saying cheerio.
No, there are what, 100...
David Hanson there. All saying about many of these people going. I just briefly want to say that although the government had to take out a lot of clauses from bills, particularly the finance bill, the constitutional reform bill, lots of legislation, one of the finance regulation acts, the Lord Bassam in the House of Lords, the government chief whip, told me that they were very happy with the amount of legislation they'd got through in the wash-up. Betty Boothroyd, people saying goodbye
yes,
for the last time.
That's right. There are 145 members who are not coming back, who are not fighting this election again, and they're all of them are saying farewell to the Speaker anyway, whether they're coming back or not. I think it must be very difficult for the Speaker to remember who those are who are not coming back.
Well, this one is one who's not coming back.
That's
David
right.
Howard.
That's right. Now, very interesting is David Howard, because remember, Liberal Dem member for Cambridge, an academic who has only done one term, 5 years, and I understand he's enjoyed his life and he's made his mark here, but he wants to go back into his academic work, and this is why he's going away.
Kim Howells. Many people have liked Kim Howells as a parliamentarian.
Yes.
Many people thought he might get into the cabinet one day,
right.
but he didn't in the end.
Made it. But you see, I was saying, for the Speaker to remember who is not coming back.
Well, you can remember Michael Fabricant under any circumstances, who's going through there. And Evan Harris.
Yes.
Some good troublemakers this time. Some really good parliamentarians going through this afternoon.
Yes, you see, here's a lady from Wales, Betty Williams, who is not coming back. I know that, but I wouldn't be able to remember them all.
What did you say to them?
I would just say to them, have a happy and healthy campaign for those who are. What else can you do? You can't wish them well if you're
for those who are standing again.
And then I did have a little list of those who were retiring, so I was able to say happy retirement to them. But of course, there's far too many now.
Jeremy Corbyn, one of the Islington MPs.
Yes.
Sometimes votes with his own side, but not too often. I think that Speaker's reminding him of that.
Yes,
Brian Idden, who got one of the private members' bills through today.
That's right.
And he's going.
He's not coming back, rather.
No, he's not.
And here is Anne Cryer.
Anne Cryer.
Yes, who followed her husband into the sea.
And her son is standing again in somewhere like Dagenham or Upminster or one of those.
Yes, right.
To the east of London.
Eddie.
2 more going through.
Yes.
And now Sir Patrick Cormack next in line after this.
Yes.
Well, we've drawn a blank. But he seems to be leaving because he's getting a nice farewell, so I apologise to him very sincerely. This gentleman is certainly leaving, Sir Patrick Cormack. He stood for election as Speaker last year.
And Patrick was chairman of the Select Committee on Northern Ireland, chairman of the History of Parliament Trust, done so much work for Parliament in very many different spheres.
He does. He was History of Parliament Trust. He was just launching a book on something like the 1820 election just recently. He loves the history of the place. Sir Nicholas Winterton, who I'm happy to say is going to be joining us for our coverage of the state opening on, we expect, the 3rd week of May. He said this afternoon to me, "My feelings are on one hand of sadness, but on the other hand of relief. I will miss the comradeship that has been part of my life here for the last 39 years, right across the political parties."
Here's his wife. Yes, Anne.
Representative for Congleton.
Yes.
And from Congleton, and behind them, a figure who can bring grown men to tears as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, Edward Lee. He regularly has a go at BBC bosses. The Director General is often in his sights. I didn't hear what you were saying, sir.
Quite right.
Oh, right. Gives everyone a hard time who's involved in the public service. Charles Walker, MP for Broxbourne, I think. A keen parliamentarian, a young man, but he's very much a House of Commons person. He enjoys the House of Commons, has no interest in becoming a minister. He says he wants to hold the government to account. Doesn't matter if it's a Conservative government or a Labour government. He wants to hold governments to account. A very traditional role for MPs. David, just very briefly, peers don't have all this nonsense of an election. They'll all be back, will they? What happens?
That's right. Well, writs are sent out to the constituencies, to the returning officers, asking them to send an elected member back. Writs go to individual members of the House, so we get all the same people back. Whether they sit on the same side of the House remains to be seen. But apart from the bishops...
Alan Milburn there.
Oh, yes.
Another Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. So the peers will be coming back. Funny enough, one of the last things that Parliament did was pass a clause enabling a Commonwealth peer, Lady Gardiner of Parks, to continue sitting.
That's right. Yes.
Lady Gardiner has been saved for the nation.
She's a great activist, is Trixie Gardiner, actually. We're very pleased about that.
We should perhaps say this was correcting a mistake where an inadvertent repeal threatened to mean that peers who weren't British subjects could no longer sit, but happily a provision in the Constitutional Reform and Governance Act has put that right.
She wouldn't have received the writ, would she?
Correct.
No.
She wouldn't have received the writ, and she was not happy about it.
Oh, well, who would be? I mean, Trixie Gardiner's been in the Lords quite a long time.
Michael Clapham there, saying farewell. And now, from Luton, the MP for Luton. He's another House of Commons man, Kelvin Hopkins. Yeah. And he likes to be a thorn in the government's side. I think he doesn't really matter who he is. He just likes to be a thorn in everyone's side. James Purnell, whose resignation back at the local election results in May almost precipitated a rebellion against Gordon Brown.
Wasn't he thought to be leader of the Labour Party at one stage, Purnell, isn't that right?
And yet he's going after really quite a short time. Absolutely. And the former Defence Secretary and Scottish Secretary here.
Yes.
Des Brown, the MP for Kilmarnock, not standing again. Lot of anguish in that constituency where Johnny Walker is closing its plant for Johnny Walker whisky, has caused a huge problem in Kilmarnock. And Gavin Strang.
Gavin I've known a very long time.
Edinburgh East.
Yes, I think we both came into the House about the same time.
Briefly in Tony Blair's first cabinet.
Yes.
Again, another one of the awkward squad. Semi-awkward.
Well, I mean...
When he was younger, more awkward.
Yes, I think the fire went out of him a little while ago.
Maybe. More farewells. This is a very fine selection of people going. John Grogan, the MP for Selby. Yes. Had a bit of a haircut since I last saw him. I think that's why I couldn't recognise him then. Well, I'm sorry we're not able to do them in. That accounts for the fact that you don't always see the name on BBC Parliament, where we're trying to wonder who on earth it could be. Could be Tom Levett. We're betting on Tom Levett. Streatham MP, Keith Hill, a former PPS to Tony Blair.
That's right. Yes.
Great loyalist. Great House Deputy Chief Whip for Labour.
Chief Whip, yes.
At one stage.
Railway background. I think he was the NUR research officer.
Was he?
Many years ago, yes, before he came into the House. I have him. Oh, here is he was with the Labour Party, an official of the Labour Party.
Fraser Kemp.
Yes,
we think
Fraser
this is
Kemp.
Fraser Kemp.
That's right. Fraser Kemp.
A Scotsman sitting in London.
Yes.
Or not London, Darlington, I think. Chris Mullen, who gave a very sentimental final speech. He said, "Mr. Speaker, I depart with mixed feelings. The great thing about democracy is that although harsh things are sometimes said, we're not actually trying to kill each other. Differences are ultimately resolved at the ballot box. One side wins, one side loses, and the loser lives to fight another day." Andrew Pelling, independent MP for Croydon, at first thought he wasn't going to stand again, but he is going to stand as an independent again, and many people, Betty, have speculated we might have a few
independents, I should think so, yes.
Would you like to see that?
I think it gives a little spice to the Commons with a few independents.
Andrew McKinley.
Yes, oh yes.
Popular,
but very
on every
popular.
Side of the Commons.
Yes. He'll be great. Andrew will be greatly missed. I mean, he's often a thorn in the side of the government, often has been, but nevertheless he's respected and he's loved here, Andrew McKinley.
And so loved, he's joining us for state opening, along with Sir Nick Winterton.
So having quite a crowd then, aren't you?
It will be quite a crowd, and we're hoping you're going to come as be part of the crowd.
I didn't know I'd been invited. It's nice to be invited. Thank you.
Come along, join the party. And finally, farewell to the principal doorkeeper, who's asked the Speaker to leave in front of him. That then brings us to the end of the 54th Parliament of the United Kingdom. But here's a date for your diary. Join us live as Parliament reassembles on the 18th of May. And I'll be joined again by Baroness Boothroyd to take us through proceedings. David, I'm afraid, will be busy in the Lords. And on the 18th of May, Parliament will assemble again. It's not the state opening. We will have the election of the new Speaker, which could be John Bercow. We'll have the approval of the Speaker the following day. So join us both on the 18th at 2:30, on the 19th at 11. Then we'll be seeing some swearing in. And then a week later or so, it'll be all the bells and whistles for the state opening. Now, Parliament might be away for a month. No excuse to stop watching us. Stay tuned throughout the election campaign. We'll bring you the party political press conferences each morning. And from 8 p.m. every evening, we'll be bringing you all the BBC TV's election programmes. So whether it's prime ministerial debates, programmes for the news channel, daily politics this week, programmes from the English regions, the Welsh leadership debates, you'll find them all here on BBC Parliament. From my guests, I would like to say farewell. From Betty Boothroyd.
Thank you and goodbye.
And look forward to seeing you on May the 18th.
Me too.
What will you be doing on May the 18th, David, why you can't be here?
I shall be sitting in the chamber, or perhaps standing some of the time. We have to arrange for every member to take the oath, and it all takes quite a while.
It will take quite a while. We will see some of that on the 18th and 19th. We've said farewell to 150 MPs this evening. Many more will disappear, no doubt, at the election. And Keith McDougall, on Record Review a couple of weeks ago, spoke to two departing MPs. And let's hear again that interview from a couple of weeks ago, where Keith talked to two MPs, John Maples, Matthew Taylor, who are leaving the Commons with mixed feelings.